Okay, well, thank you all for coming tonight to this really exciting event. And I was told earlier on this was actually John Howard's favourite lecture theatre at UTS. And I don't know if anybody can guess why. All the seats are blue. So basically we're following sort of hallowed footsteps here tonight, and we've got some really important guests for us, who I'll introduce in a few minutes. But before I start, I'd just like to say a few thank yous to people who've actually helped organise this event, because it hasn't actually been very easy to organise, to be honest with you. So thank you, Mona, and Nick Zay, who is here from the Building Environment Student Association, for putting up with me doing the organisation of this event. Even getting that logo was actually not an easy task, believe it or not. Now, before we start, I'd just like to acknowledge that UTS is, in fact, located on Aboriginal lands, and I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and on whose ancestral lands we're actually meeting here tonight. I'd also like to pay respects to their elders, their past, present, and future elders, who are the traditional custodians of knowledge for this land. Now, knowledge is actually central to what we're going to be talking about tonight. This is because we're going to be talking about the skills, the attributes, and the knowledge that you're going to need to be the future leaders of this huge industry that we all want to be part of. We all know that the industry needs to change, and you are going to play a central role as the future leaders of that industry in bringing about that change. We need to bring about that change because our government needs to rely on us as the future leaders of the industry to provide safe, sustainable, and trustworthy buildings so to underpin the growth of this economy as we move forward. And UTS does not shy away from discussing the difficult issues in a respectful way. And you all are going to play a critical role in bringing about change. The universities are the precious places where you all should be learning about the ethics, the values, the skills, and the knowledge that you need to actually bring about change in this industry going forward. And that's why we named this event tonight, Making Way for the Modern Constructors of Tomorrow, because we should not be accepting the way that things have actually been done in the past. And that's actually why we've selected our wonderful guests here tonight. They've been selected very carefully because they are widely respected as being people who have actually stood up and actually challenged the status quo and asked the questions about how this industry can actually change going forward and what we can do differently. And they've challenged the norms, the practices, and the standards of workmanship that have really undermined trust in this industry over the last few decades. And they all believe passionately in the value of education as well. So David Chandler, who you all know as the Building Commissioner, has had an exemplary career of 40 years in the industry, and he's managed some of Australia's most iconic projects, such as the Parliament House in Canberra. And he was awarded the Order of Australia in 1989 for his services to the construction industry. So since being appointed the New South Wales Building Commissioner in 2019, David and his team at the Building Commission have been driving a 6-pillar reform strategy called Construct New South Wales, which has been designed to build a more trustworthy and sustainable New South Wales construction industry. And this reform program is seen around the world. It's an exemplar of how to reform an industry because it's actually bringing about real meaningful change in the way things are being done in the industry. Brian Seidler. Brian is the Executive Director of the Master Builders of Association of New South Wales. Brian joined the Masters Builders Association as a trainee industrial relations officer in the 1980s and has gradually moved up into the Executive Director role, which he's been in since the year 2000. Brian has also received an Order of Australia in 2019 for his services to the building and construction industry, and he's represented on numerous committees and boards, including National Chairman of Mates in Construction Suicide Prevention Programme. He's a board member of New South Wales Council for Women, and he's also on the Construct New South Wales Steering Group. Nicholle Sparks is the General Manager of Delivery and Operations at Frasers Property. So Nicholle's purview includes national oversight of construction, sustainability, health and safety, and the environment, and business processes. Sounds an impossible job to me. Across the whole properties group's property portfolio. And prior to being with Frasers, you were with Lang O'Rourke and Lend-Lease. And as well as serving on Frasers Properties Executive Management Team, Nicholle also is a member of the National Residential Divisional Council of the Property Council of Australia. Stephanie Nguyen, got your name pronounced correctly this time. Stephanie is one of our star students, who you probably all know. She was a recent construction management UTS graduate, but your first degree was actually in commerce at Monash University, I understand. So Stephanie was awarded the Richard Crookes Construction Merit Scholarship when she was here, and she actually co-founded the Built Environment Student Association, which has played a great role in actually organising this event with us tonight. And you've already worked on some of Australia's most iconic projects. I believe you just worked on the Sydney Modern Art Gallery, and we are really proud to have you as one of our alumni, and thanks for coming here tonight. David Cremona. David Cremona's got a really interesting background. David started off in 1997, that was the year I arrived in Australia, as a labourer on a construction site working for Meriton. And David has worked his way up through the industry. Actually, by 2006, he was a site project manager on a Meriton project. Then he was promoted to National Director of Construction in 2013. And under his leadership, Meriton achieved the industry's very first Gold 4.5 star iCert rating in 2022. David's now General Manager at Coronation, a fully integrated property management group and development group with about $1.5 billion worth of construction projects in the pipeline. And I'm sure we're going to see some interesting things in Coronation over the next few years. And Divya Mehta is Deputy Managing Director of the Decode Group. And Divya started with Decode as a development manager after a career with Cushman & Wakefield as a project manager. And subsequently, Divya has progressed to the Chief Operating Officer. And in her current role as Deputy Managing Director, she leads the group's business planning and operational strategies. Divya is actually an architect by profession. And I know we've got some architect students here as well tonight. And she also represents the industry on a number of important forums, including the Diversity and Inclusion Committee of the Property Council of Australia. So we've got an incredibly diverse group of industry leaders here tonight, and you will have a chance later on to ask them some questions. But we're going to start the night tonight with me asking the panel some questions as well. And so I'm going to start with David, actually. We're going to start and end with David tonight. And so, David, I was just wondering if you could tell us something about your background and how the industry has changed over the last 40 years since you've been here in it.
Goodness, it's more than 40 years. It's now over 50 years. So
is it? Wow.
Back. I started as a cadet with A.W. Edwards in 1969 and was one of the early intake in the construction management program of University of New South Wales. So it's been a very long grounded university. So I started on the tools, a bit like David. I worked my way up through the business and got to learn a lot about it. So I've been very fortunate in my career, though, that I've landed on really great projects. And the highlight, obviously, was the new Parliament House project in Canberra, but just a really good trail of projects throughout my career. So, mate, it really started on the tools, worked my way through all different levels of construction, and suddenly end up as a regulator, and I've got to tell you, that's a completely new breed of business. But I do encourage you all to think about the possibility of being a regulator, because it's really worthy work, and I'm sure you'd enjoy it. So we'll talk more about that tonight.
How has the industry changed, David, over those years?
Well, really dramatically, because I just think about it the other day, and we site batched the concrete on the first project I worked on, which was the Clancy Auditorium at University of New South Wales. I remember there were 112 piles, and we site batched all the concrete for that. So you don't see much site batching these days, do you? And so it's changed dramatically. I remember the hoisting arrangements when we did building in Young Street, which was still the old the hoist, which only materials hoist technically, but somehow on Saturdays there was a load of people on them. But those hoists were just only for materials, and it was a real battle loading and unloading those. In those days you got paid height allowance to walk up. Every 5 floors you got another 20 cents or something to walk up another level. So that's changed. Cranes have really changed, David, haven't they? You know, I look back on the old Favcos, which I started, the first job was a stiff leg guy derrick over the top of Challis House. And that really gets you back to the ancient cranes. It's almost, they probably use those on the pyramids, I reckon. But crane technology is unbelievable. So in the last 7 or 8 years, I think moving from diesel to electric, the intelligence on board a crane these days is huge. The engineering that's involved in being able to do lifts that we never thought of doing. Parliament House, we had 2 1500s and a 750 Favco, and we had to do 2 cranes lifting pieces of the flag mast up. In these days, the same crane would just lift that piece up in one go, not a problem. So pumps, concrete pumps, goodness, the first of the pumps, David, we used slip forms. Remember slip forms? Well, the formwork we used was really quite archaic, but pumping technology is unbelievable now, that you can just really pump almost to the last barrel load of what you want to put up on a pour these days. So it just gets better and better. All points surveying. You know, the industry's just leapt forward in the last 20 years in terms of technology, but not in terms of productivity and not in terms of some of the things we could do better.
Okay, thank you. And Brian, as the other stalwart of the industry on the panel, sorry to call you that, I'm just wondering if you could also tell us about what's changed over the years that you've been in the industry.
Well, look, interestingly, I'm a graduate of University of New South Wales as well, and in the early 80s, and what we've witnessed since then, interestingly, I think we've gone from a more technically proficient industry. There are still some of the basics that we are lacking, and I've had the advantage of appearing in 3 royal commissions voluntarily, I might say, and that means that you give evidence without being subpoenaed. And I've been on a number of inquiries. I've sat on a number of committees, and over time, I've got to say that particularly in the last maybe 5 years, we've seen a move that I've never seen before. And so this is not about patting the bureaucrat on the back or someone who has done a lot of work, but we have seen a move back to trying to get people who are proficient in every trade and classification. And I think over the last 10 to 20 years, that's been lost. And why has it been lost? I don't know why it's been lost, but it's certainly been lost. And in very basic areas such as, and I hear there are architects here, maybe it starts with the design phase of buildings, the engineering side. Builders can probably build anything as long as it's buildable that architects and designers put in front of us. But the stuff or the information that we're now getting, up until recently, was lacking. And so builders were asked to become designers and to become almost the voice of the client. That's what I've seen starting to decline. And in the last at least 3 to 4 years, we've seen some new legislation, particularly in New South Wales, which makes it legally enforceable that the architect and the engineer now is responsible for their work. And that's terribly significant for the builder, because the builder can price it better, can price it cleaner, and also then you'll know whether or not there are problems up front before we get into the build. So look, as an observation of some decades, I won't tell you how many decades, but yes, it's been, I think we've been technical, we've lost that technical ability, but now we're coming back to it, which is significant.
Thanks, Brian. And now over to our newest member of the industry, Stephanie. I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your journey into the industry and what have been your early experiences of working in it.
So I've been really fortunate enough to start my career working on a really amazing project, the Sydney Modern project. And I think when I started my cadetship there, I didn't really understand the global impact that that building would have, and the significance that it would have. But for me, being on that project, I think I was exposed to the level of dedication that people, the passion that people really have working in the industry, and the sacrifice, the commitment. Like, I was able to see all that, and that motivated me to work even harder. And I was blessed to work with people who took the time out to guide me, to mentor me, and they just had my back in, I was young, I'm trying to learn things, and being on a site with, 400 guys is sometimes very daunting. And so to have guys in a team who support me, who had my back, who made me feel confident to be there was, it was really lovely. Yeah. I think one of the things that I do struggle with sometimes is, and I think this is no lie, but the work hours is really long. And I know that a lot of the older generation, they're like, well, this is how it's always been done. But I think as a junior in the industry, it's not something that is the most attractive part of the job. And for me, I'm also fortunate enough that I have a partner who works from home, who can take most of that load for me so that I can give my best self at work. But I feel like that is not very sustainable. I don't know how that is sustainable for someone like myself. And I'm thinking about the future now. I'm an older person I'm an older site engineer working in the industry. And I just think, how is working in this industry, how is working on site sustainable for a woman?
Right, we'll make a return to that topic later on. Well, thanks, Stephanie, for giving us the insights into your new insights into working in the industry. And I think that might actually be a good segue into the whole issue of the sustainability of the industry, not just its environmental sustainability, but its social sustainability as well. Yeah. So,
if I'm being really, really candid, I don't know how, I don't know how a woman, how are we to balance the full-time commitment that is required of the job. And I think a lot of the successful people who work in this industry is because they've given up their time and they're so dedicated to the project. And to gain success, you have to. And that's one of the things that I admire most. But I think also, I just don't see how that works. Motherhood, building a life. How do you balance those things? How can you give your best at work and then also, do the home stuff? I don't see that, and I haven't met an engineer who's also a mum who's stayed in the building game yet.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So David, you coined the term trustworthy and sustainable construction industry. I was just wondering if you could tell us what you mean by that.
Well, it's a very big word, and one of the things that we toyed with when we started some language for this reform was to pick words that weren't being used. And it was interesting, we threw trustworthy out there, and it was interesting, it was the new buzzword in town, and you could see in all the developers' brochures straight away, we're trustworthy, and that was basically through their lens. So I think what's really important of the last 3 years is we've actually started to get a plimsoll line as to what trust looks like, and it's one that allows you to raise all the boats. I think no one made a distinction previously between what was trustworthy and what wasn't. And we've been able in the last 3 years to start to create what that looks like. And we're leaving the people that are going to stay stuck on the bottom of the harbour, they're going to stay there pretty stuck forever. But what's really, really pleasing is to see the people of getting 2.5, 3 stars, 3.5 star ratings starting to say, well, gee, now I'll be 4 next time or whatever. And or they might go back to 3.5 from 4, but that's just part of the cycle. But a trustworthy building, well, a trustworthy building is something that doesn't harm anybody. I think it gets down to harms. So it doesn't harm them physically, and it doesn't harm them emotionally. It doesn't harm them economically, and the building doesn't harm the environment in which it's being made. I think you need to look at all of those things together, because it's about making sure that people are not harmed in any of those 4 facets of what I call the cornerstones of trust. And when you look at all of those things together and you start to do your work and you plan a project and you organise and deliver a project, I think you've just got to constantly remind yourself, have I got all of the 4 corners of trust covered? Because our industry, you know, we've been around building buildings for over 200 years in Australia. And by and large, the public believe we build a good built world. This industry, its buildings aren't falling down on top of people like in other countries. The public have a huge confidence in what we make. And I think in recent times, what we've done is started to shatter that belief. And we've got to get back quickly to make sure that the public confidence in what we do is restored and locked in forever. So that's where trust comes from. And I think if we could start to look at it in its multi-dimensions, but more importantly for young people who are graduating today in these times, you are the custodians of the trustworthiness of our industry. The public belief that what we make doesn't carry the harms that we've seen in recent times. So you're all it, and we're looking to start to pass the baton to you so that you see trustworthiness as your badge of honour, and then you'll serve the industry and yourselves very well.
Thanks, David. And Divya, what does trustworthiness and sustainability mean to you?
I agree with what David said, and I'd just add a bit more to it. I feel trustworthy brings along with itself accountability and transparency. So the work that has occurred in the Office of Building Commissioner I've been in Australia for 12 years, and I have seen the change the wave of Office of Building Commissioner has brought to our industry. And the work that has occurred in the industry in the last few years has been about the intention of the people that are building. We reached a stage where everyone was just looking at profit, 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 and profit. Starting from the trades on site to the workers on site to the businesses, that the financial institutions, the developers, the builders, the consultants, the subcontractors, everyone. It had all become about the bottom line. But we have now come back to asking ourselves, where is the passion in the industry? And if there is, bring it back. And let's make that the core of building. And that cleanup in the industry that has occurred in the last 2-3 years is critical in building that trustworthiness back from the consumers. And when I go to buy a unit, these are things I'm now confident about. If I see an ISO rating, if I see the brand of what they're talking about, has the developer who is selling the unit, have they built the right team? Do they have the right private certifier? These are things consumers are asking these days. And that's the trustworthiness that we have been able to create. So for me, it's businesses being proud of its practices, proud of its people and culture, and proud of its workmanship. A combination of this is what trustworthiness is about.
And Nicholle, you're responsible for sustainability in your organisation. I was just wondering maybe if you could talk to us about what your vision of a trustworthy and sustainable industry is, maybe focusing on the sustainability dimension, perhaps.
Sure. Can I ask the people in the audience a question first to help me answer that?
Definitely. Go for it.
Who's a student? Put your hand up if you're a student. Okay, cool. A few hanger-oners, that's good. If you're a student, and you want to work with someone in the property and development industry and construction, put your hand up if you're reliable and dependable. Jeez, come on, people.
You should ask the lecturers, actually, not the students.
All right, so keep your hand up if you think you're also consistent and ethical. So that means that you accept the standard that you walk past. Okay, sorry, I'll answer the question now. All I want to say is, to go back to that, you accept the standard that you walk past. That's something that I was told 20 plus years ago, and it was a health and safety thing. You accept the standard that you walk past. The same can be said today. The standard that you accept, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept about quality and sustainability, and about problems, about trying to solve the questions for tomorrow, to create better buildings, to create better outcomes, to reduce our carbon footprint. So for the developers and the builders that you're going on to work for, think about that. Think about the values that they have. Think about what they're asking you to do, because the builders and developers of tomorrow are ethical. They're going to have integrity. They're going to be reliable. They're not going to be afraid of a 3-star or a 4-star. They're going to look at that as, I will improve. What can I learn? They will collaborate. They won't use technology as an outcome to succeed. They will collaborate with technology to ensure that innovation occurs. They won't worry about what someone else is doing down the road. They'll be curious, and they might go and ask questions so that they can learn from that. We'll work in an industry where we actually create better outcomes together, knowing that there's not enough of us around and that we have to rely on each other in industry to get better outcomes. And that's what sustainability is about, whether we're talking about reducing our carbon footprint, ensuring that the biodiversity environment that we're building on is sustained, ensuring that we leave a better legacy, ensuring that we've got builders of tomorrow, ensuring that we have social sustainable outcomes so you can go home and be a mother. I'll get off my soapbox now, but think about information as knowledge that you can share rather than knowledge that is power.
Fantastic. Now we're going to go back to David now, because the two key pillars of the New South Wales Construct Reform process have been two acts of legislation, the RAB Act and the Design Practitioners Act. And I was just wondering, David, if you could actually talk to us about what regulatory changes are likely to be affecting the students' future for the next 10 years.
Amazing being old and a fountain of youth. But anyway, I think, first of all, we need to recognise the other big change that's happened in our industry, and that's the digitisation of our industry. There's people in this room that all have a different view of digitisation, but the digital economy is going to define your careers. You will work in a digital economy in a way that we didn't enjoy. I mean, I remember seeing the last of the hard copy drawings. Parliament House was drawn by hand. So if you go to the National Archives, they're not in digital, they're just all hand drawn. These are big changes, but digital is going to be extraordinarily important for you. Most importantly is that in the regulations that are now taking place in the licensing space is that you are going to have a digital twin for the rest of your life. So a design practitioner and a building practitioner and a certifier, all of these people, when they do their job of declaring, that declaration will follow them for the rest of their days. It won't just be that company they were working with, it will be that person. And what we're starting to now realise is that people are accepting the fact that they have a new power. And that power is that they can say no because they understand that their brand is important to them. Not just the company's brand, but the brand of them. The brand of all of you. So please, as you start to make your way forward into this industry, which I'm so excited to see so many of you interested in this conversation about, is that realise that the digitisation of our industry is going to empower you to now stand up and be you. And I think that's really something I think the regulations are transforming right now.
Right, thank you. And Brian, could you say something about the regulatory sphere and how you see the future of students' lives in the industry being changed by future regulation going forward?
I think what the Commissioner said is that we will now have an imprint that will follow us everywhere. But the other area that students must be mindful of is that if there are failures in the area that will accompany you as well. So it's about getting better and being more precise with everything you do. And just perhaps referring a little bit to Nicholle, that if you don't do better, if you let the bad stuff, you walk past the bad stuff and you don't correct it, then we will have an industry that will not go forward. So at the moment we're talking about a new licensing regime. There's a discussion paper in industry, and I think the tone of it is that we are going to ask, or the industry will ask, that people are better credentialed. So gone are the days where we will simply do a recognition of prior learning in some instances that will give you a license or that will give you a pathway. It'll be far stricter and how the industry introduces a licensing regime and a recognition of your skills. I think it's going to become tougher, and I think it should become tougher.
And David, what about the consequences of, and Nicholle was talking about being ethical and doing the right thing. What about the consequences now compared to before the reform process came into place? What are the consequences for the students if they don't do the right thing in the future? Have they changed from what they were in the past?
I think that the point I should have made as well is that lifelong learning is actually going to be your life. You are going to be needing to keep up with CPD, so you're going to find that as the associations that represent you, whether it's Engineers Australia or whether it's the architects or the builders, you are going to need to face into an understanding that you will not walk out of here today, as I probably did and you did, David, thinking that, well, that's it, done and dusted, nothing else to learn here. How wrong that was in hindsight, but for all of you, your currency is going to be the important factor here. You are headed for lifelong learning, and so part of this licensing work, Brian, will be that you will be constantly demonstrating and need to demonstrate that you've actually learned stuff and you're continuing to learn. What I'd love to see straight up is that all of you could tell me 5 Australian standards, right?
You did promise you wouldn't ask that question.
We won't do that today.
I've got them tattooed here.
That's always the killer question, but I had prepared the 2 students for that question. David, I was just wondering if we can come back to you because we haven't involved you in a discussion yet. You've got a really interesting background. I mean, you've come right up through from being a labourer right up to the top of the industry. And I think I'm particularly interested in what you think are the attributes, knowledge and skills that the students here in the room today will need to build a successful career like you have in the construction industry in the future?
Well, I'll put it down to a few. Definitely people skills. You've got to have people skills. Our industry is all about collaboration, working together, communicating. Communication is probably one of the biggest things that you're going to do throughout your whole career. And look, I know since COVID, the whole Zoom and Teams meetings, but guys, please, you're not going to resolve all your problems via Teams and Zooms. You've got to get out in the field, walk the site, amongst all the trades, learn, and you'll progress. Look, I'm also a big believer in digitisation and also prefabrication. I think that's the future that the industry is going to lead in the next few decades. Look, Australia is a little bit behind compared to Europe and America. In regards to prefabrication, but having that mindset of prefabrication and modular construction, I think will be a changing future landscape for the new constructors moving forward, and I'm really excited about that. Skills, look, I think with the skills, it's going to come with time. You're not going to walk out of here and you're going to know everything. Probably maybe 10% of everything. Experience comes with time. You can't teach experience. So just be patient and listen and learn, I think is one of the key things.
And Divya, you came from an architectural background, so you also had an interest in history. And I was just wondering, based on your experience of being here for 12 years and coming from an architectural background, what you think are the key skills and attributes that students need to acquire in order to be successful?
So we're talking about three things here: skills, knowledge, and attributes. Skills and knowledge, in my opinion, will come, with time. You enter the industry, you learn the skills, you acquire the knowledge, and that happens with the experience you gain. I agree that the construction industry has changed and is very, very adaptable and changes every day. 20 years ago, it wasn't the same, and it's not going to be the same 20 years from now. But the part where attributes comes in, attributes are something that I don't think have changed or will change. And the attributes we need to have are a learner's mindset. If we are willing to learn the new ways of doing things or whatever is needed for that situation to have a good outcome for, we will be fine. And I want to share something with you which I hope we all look at with a lot of gratitude. There is a person in the business that I work, and this person I've been working with for the last 6 years. He is the epitome of everything relevant in the industry today. So you'd look at him and you'd go, I want to go ask him a question. I want to go ask him how this is done. Apart from the experience that he has, he's also relevant with the AI techniques, ChatGPT, net zero, sustainable methods of building. And these are all new things that have come up in the last few years. But the person sitting right here, his name is Frank Farina. Frank, I'm going to ask you to stand up for a second. And he's been a mentor for a lot of us in the business. And we still go to him for any new thing that comes up. It's only because he has a learner's attitude. And I'd like you all to give him a round of applause.
Thank you, David. You've really dropped me in at doing that. That was left field, I can tell you. I happen to be working on a very, luckily I guess, David Chandler's pillared group as part of one of the invitees to that group. And I have Chris Bulmer sitting next to me, and he's a colleague from the AIB, and we've partnered with New South Wales government on many, many projects and working with them, and that's been an area where we've learnt a lot and we can contribute a lot. But one of the quick key questions that I think Nicholle put to everyone was, the honesty and the integrity in this industry, and that's a pillar. That's absolutely a pillar, as David has said. And one of the things I used to tell people in the industry when I was a project manager and a construction manager was, have you got what you paid for? Now that doesn't matter whether you're going to buy a suit or a car or a building. It's, have you got what you paid for? And that comes back to standards, it comes back to codes of practice, and a hell of a lot more. Thank you, David.
Divya, I'm going to put you on the spot now, because you put Frank on the spot. What about change? How do you bring about change? What sorts of skills and attributes do you need to bring about change? Because we all here tonight knowing that the industry's got to change. It's got to up its game, and we've got to rebuild the trust that's been lost in the industry, in the community. So how do you go into an industry? How do these students go into the industry? These are the champions of change for the future. How are they going to do that? What sort of attributes do they need to build to do that?
How do you bring about change in the industry, or how do you drive change in the industry? I think my only answer to that would be by being adaptable and authentic. So first is realizing that change is needed, and we all know that change is inevitable. We all know that we can't run away from it, right? accepting that something needs to change and starting with yourself first. So first be adaptable for that change yourself, lead by example, and take everybody along with you. There's one thing that I have gone through in my tenure in Australia is adaptability, because when I joined the business, we were 5 people in the business, and as of today, we're 130 plus. So I've been through, taking the business from where it is, along with many key people in the business. I haven't done it alone. There's a whole team of people that are involved in it, starting from the founder. But it's about how do you take a business from an idea to Australia's fastest growing company 2 years in a row. How do you do that? It can't happen without the adaptability you need to have to be able to change on a daily basis. And that's what the industry has gone through in the last few years. I think all of us would agree with that. And that will not stop here. It will continue. So if we all want to be a part of that growth in the industry, we all need to be very adaptable and authentic. Speak your mind, say, call out the bad behavior, stand up for the good, back each other up. And that also comes back to, Stephanie, your question. I think Nicholle and I can answer that for you. How can a woman be in an industry full of men on site, yet comfortable to lead how she wants to, while being a mother? The answer to that, in my opinion, is it's not easy. It's never going to be easy, and it never was. But I think the same answer stands for every industry. I haven't seen an industry where it comes easy. So I feel that the only way you can sustain in that environment is by being yourself, prioritizing at the right time, and being efficient. I think the pressure of being able to do it all comes from within. No one can put that externally on me, and they should not be able to put it externally on you. It's us. It's a self-inflicted pressure we take as good people, as well-intended people. We want to do our best. And the day we realize that it's us that's causing that pressure on ourselves, we'll be able to handle it better. And we'll be able to communicate and outperform. So I think it can happen. Yes, it's not easy, but it has never been easy.
So, thanks, Divya. Sorry, putting you on the spot there. Get your own back. Brian, I know you've been itching to say something here for a while about how students can actually go about developing the attributes that we just talked about. What's your advice?
I just wanted to comment on change. Change is driven in the main in our industry, or has been driven by government or by local government wanting to introduce change. Take safety, for instance. In 1983, we had the Occupational Health and Safety Act, which introduced a new system of how we should deal with safety. Now, that was a mammoth exercise of making us in the building industry responsible for those at work, at law, and with large fines. So a lot of the change, which I know can come from a personal background, but if you don't have a government that's backing you with the legislation, and if you look at the legislation that went through just recently that the Commissioner looks after, it wouldn't have happened. Our change of getting responsible building, at least onto the agenda of improving the building industry built environment, wouldn't have happened unless there was legislation, and strong legislation, to back it up. So if it's not there, and we don't have governments with the wherewithal to recognise the problems that we do have, then we might have change at site level, but then that'll go a lot to how the client deals with the builder and the contract. However, one of the main movers, the disruptors, has to be government. So we can't forget that. In all the punctuation points along the history that I've observed for the last number of decades is that we are toing and froing dependent on the colour of government as to whether things improve or don't improve, or in fact go backwards. But look, just getting on to how do students develop attributes. It's interesting, if you look at the contractors in the industry who have a leaning to educate, and not all of us in the industry have a leaning to educate. That is the employers. Maybe the majority of those of you who are employed by contractors who invest in the cadetship, invest in apprenticeship, then indeed. But not everybody does. And so we must ensure that those in our industry actually give back to the industry. MBA, for instance, has been a strong supporter of a ratio for apprentices to tradespeople. That's not supported by everybody in industry. But the level of trades going into an apprenticeship is, even though we hear the statistics that there's an increase in the intake, the actual completion rate is down. So we might have a high intake, but the completion rate's down. And there's a whole host of reasons for that, but the majority is education. We're not educating our young ones to actually follow a trade pathway, and we don't have many in our industry who invest in those wanting a pathway through a trade. And it's interesting, and I think maybe David, I hope, would back me up with this, but second tier builders at the moment, there's a number of them looking to employ foremen who've got a trade background. Why? Because they have an understanding of how to coordinate trades on site. They understand the psyche of the subcontract, of the contractor, and that's really important. A lot of them then go on to get an education at university, a Bachelor of Project Management or Construction Management, but it's about understanding how a building site works. That's terribly significant in the scheme of things.
Mm. And Nicholle, how do you think the students go about developing these skills and attributes, understanding how things work on site, etc.?
I think a lot of you are going to come out of uni and you're going to have learning fatigue. If I look back at myself, I wasn't good with books. I sometimes wonder how I actually got through university. But what I did find when I got onto site was that apart from loving every minute of it, I was curious. And I changed that mindset of I had to learn, because for me to learn was hard and books and, I procrastinated. So if I became curious, then I would just rock up to meetings because, I wanted to be part of a hot smoke test. So I'd just turn up, and then one day someone would give me something to do. Or I wanted to know how to, slew a crane. So I went and learned how to be a rigger. You just unpack problems by breaking them apart and putting yourself in a situation until someone tells you can't be a part of it. And more often than not, the more people in a room, the more a problem can be broken up and the quicker it can be solved. I'm just looking at my notes so I don't ramble. But also, when you learn something, or you're curious about something and you master it, you haven't actually mastered it. You've learned how to do it once. So you're not the smartest person in the room just because you've done it. You're the smartest person in the room when you've done it thousands of times. So you need to respect those people. And so if you're looking at yourself as the smartest person in the room, you're probably not in the right room, which means there's a few other people you need to get in there. And when you get those people in there, ask them as many questions as you can to get the best outcome, to pull it apart as many times as you can, because as wise Frank Verona said over there, you get what you pay for. And if you don't understand the scope, you haven't broken it apart, you haven't understood what has to happen, you might have missed something, and it'll cost you 4 times to do it the right way. So make sure you've got the right people in the room. Be curious. And sometimes just walk in a room that you're not invited to, because someone will either tell you to leave or they'll give you something to do.
And David, you come up through a really interesting background, and we were talking earlier on about, you were a labourer, then you went to TAFE.
That's right.
So you come through a non-traditional background. You didn't go to university.
A very non-traditional
a bunch
background.
of university students, yeah?
Yes.
How did these students develop the skills that you picked up on that journey?
Well, I think the key thing is be curious. I was, when I was on site, I was just a labourer. no qualities whatsoever, sweeping, cleaning the floors, but go up to the carpenter, asking, why do you do it like that? Why do you cut it? Why do you lay it? You go to the concreter, the steel fixer, and I was always asking questions. I was very curious, and that thirst for curiosity and not afraid to ask people questions. You'd be surprised how many people, I used to sit down with the biggest bloke in the world, a steel fixer, and you'd look at him and go, whoa. But I just asked him a question. He sat down, he showed me how, no, this is how you do. This is how you tidy. This is how you look at the steel schedule. This is how you put it over here. Explain it to me. And I was just a labourer. And that curiosity drove my passion. And then I went to TAFE. And I went through TAFE. I didn't go through university, but I found that an experience, a very valuable experience for myself. But asking the questions, and don't be afraid to ask the questions. I learnt so much just being on the site, on the tools, and just working with the subcontractors and staying back. I didn't have to stay back. I used to stay back for a concrete pour because I just wanted to understand how do they finish it. How do they train it off? How they burn the slab? How they get those nice finishes? I'd come home late at night, and my wife would say, "What's going on?" And I just wanted to learn. So, don't be afraid to ask questions. You'll be surprised how many people will take their time out just to tell you this is how it works. And as you work your way up the ladder, I think this is really important for everyone. Is surround yourself with good people. I always describe, the Russian babushka dolls. They start like little and they go bigger, 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 bigger. Well, you start off as the little doll, okay, in your journey, in your whole career. And as you surround yourself with good people and you ask yourself questions to be answered, and you'll learn, you'll grow throughout your journey. And I always describe that to my cadets as be curious, ask those questions. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. You'll be surprised how many people will take their time out just to sit down with you and explain the reasons why. Because it's like Nicholle said, when people do this for many times, thousands of units, and build these things, they understand and they can sit down and work that. So I think that's really important, just ask the questions.
Moving on to the next question, what about, and staying with you, what about challenging the status quo? When you're asking those questions, you're obviously learning about the way that things are currently being done and have been done. But then how do you move to actually challenging the status quo and questioning what's being done? And how do the students do that? These are the leaders of the industry.
I think challenging the status quo, you got to think outside the box. You always need to think about how can we do this better? How we can do this more efficient, safer? How we can change our way. The status quo is now with the way we're building. The future will change. The industry will change. We need to evolve with the industry, and think about just because this is the way we do it. Well, it's can it be done better? I think the more minds that put thought through, we get better outcomes. And I'm a big believer in. I always used to tell my cadets on site, the 3 pillars of my foundation, the pillars that I've been saying for many decades, and they go in this order. 1, safety. We all have an obligation for safety. We all have a duty of care for our workmates. You do not walk past something and see it's unsafe and don't say anything. Call it out. That's our job. We need to make sure our sites are safe for everybody so we all can return home. The second is quality assurance. That is one of the fundamentals that I believe in, the foundations of my bedrock of what I believe in. And ITPs, it's not just a tick and flick. When you go through that ITP, if you don't understand why you're signing things off, ask the question. Go to the waterproofer or go to the particular trade or whatever you're signing off. Why? Be curious. Ask those questions. And the last is production. Look, production is program driven, and you're all going to get smashed with programs. So that's going to happen naturally. But the first 2 is really up to you guys, and having that passion and belief of safety and quality assurance is really the bedrock of what I believe in, and will make a good constructor of the future. And I think if you stick with those, I think as long as you're passionate and you're curious, you'll do wonders.
And Divya, thanks, David. Challenging the status quo, what would you change in the industry, and how would you change it? Looking at the industry and your experience of it?
I'm still playing catch up with the changes in the industry, so I wouldn't change anything at this point in time, no. But just building on challenging the status quo, I feel I walk in to my workplace every day with an attitude of challenging the status quo. And especially as a woman, I have to do that. I have to challenge the mindset that goes around, and it's subconscious. It's not an intentional mindset that people have. It's just subconscious, but I stand up and I challenge it. And the one way that I do it is, how can I make this situation better? I ask myself that question, I come up with a solution-based approach, and I speak to people about it. But I'm also willing and ready to be told otherwise. I'm willing to accept that the solution I may have brought to the table may not be the best solution, and I'm willing to accept it and say, all right, I did my best, and yeah, I'm convinced now there's a better way to resolve it, which someone else has come up with. So you've got to be humble in that process. And yeah, that's where I am. Circling back to what you just said, by the way, Martin, what I would like to definitely consider changing is the acceptance that people have when they look at a different gender walking through the door, in the boardroom, in the meeting room, being more accepting of the fact that there can be, between a room full of men, few women sitting in there that also have a point to make, a point to say, and just backing each other up, rather than making it a world full of blokes that are having fun while they are building. I think it should be a world where men and women coexist, accept each other, and create a better construction industry.
Fantastic. Nicholle, what do you think? How do you challenge the status quo in Frasers?
Oh.
Difficult questions, I know.
Oh, I know.
It's
actually not. I'm worried about all these people leaving. I'm worried where they're going, because we're very inspirational. Status quo is the most overused word in the current dictionary. Well, it's very overused. We're problem solvers. Try and keep it simple. What is the problem you're trying to solve? What is the value you're trying to create? Break it down into small, achievable chunks. They didn't invent the wheel in a day, like they didn't build the first car in a day. They investigated. They looked at what they had to do. They broke it down. We talk about programs. We talk about speed, but sometimes to go fast, you've actually got to go slow. You've got to be pragmatic. You've got to think carefully. You've got to test it. And you've actually got to listen to the people that oppose you. You've got to listen to those people that are going, oh, I don't know about that. Or, oh, I'd like to have a look at that. Or, yeah, geez, I don't know whether we can afford that. They're the people that are going to drive you, because without those people, you actually don't think a little bit differently. You don't think about how you can put it in a language that is not fearful, that change is actually not going to feel like they're going to lose a part of their role or their control or something that they hold dearly. So you've got to bring them along to actually drive the outcome. And you've got to celebrate your wins regularly, even just the small milestones. You've got to know that you're on a journey and that the value you're creating is going to deliver something that's either going to make a change, create an outcome, or deliver something great.
Fantastic. Now, I'm conscious of time because we're going to open up to the audience in a few minutes. I've just got two more questions. We're going to start with Stephanie. Stephanie, you often talk about how fantastic Richard Crookes is to work for. And it's really interesting when I ask the students.
I concur with that. They're a great
yes. And I was just wondering if you could tell us what an employer of choice means to you. An employer that actually provides all of these opportunities. Brian talked about working with an organisation that actually invests in you. Clearly, Richard Crookes invests in you, and you feel happy there. So what does an employer of choice look like to you? Because I know David's always talking about employers of choice as well. And we come to David to finish off.
Before I answer that question, I just wanted to add to what you were saying about what successful skills and attributes make you successful. I think one of the things that I've noticed and challenging the status quo is people don't actually like to be told that they're wrong. And so it's the way that you deliver it. And I've found personally as a junior, when you come in, you have all these ideas and you're like, oh, this doesn't work, but let's try to. Some people don't really like to be told that their idea is shit. Yeah. So when you approach that, one of the things that has been really helpful to me is observing first and really understanding the problem, understanding why people are doing it the way that they're doing it, and see how, obviously respectfully, truly understand, okay, what is the outcome that we're trying to achieve? Hey, I really like your idea. I've just thought of something else that we can develop on top of your great idea. Can we do this as well? What do you think about that? So that, functionally, that is one way that you can challenge the status quo at work. And I think another thing is, as you move up the ranks, it's really hard to work without your ego. You want to prove that, you're great because you want to get promoted. But I think also when ego comes into the mix, and ego makes you afraid to ask questions because you don't want to look stupid, and ego makes you always want to be right, so that you can put someone else down so you feel like you're on top, right? But I think when you are able to take a step back and remove ego from the conversation, from what you're doing, and like you were saying, be a learner. I don't know, I remember when I got promoted from a cadet to a site engineer, that expectation of what I needed to know, I put so much pressure on myself, and I started thinking, maybe I shouldn't ask this because they're gonna think I'm really stupid, and they're gonna think, why did they promote her? She doesn't know this. But it's so, like you said, it's just so interesting when you have that thought and someone else asks that question, you're like, fuck. Glad they asked that question.
Yeah.
Anyway, about that.
Fantastic.
So employer of choice.
Thank you.
An employer of choice to me, like David was saying, when we're building buildings, we want to think about it holistically, right? How is this building, this building should not harm you physically, mentally, emotionally. And I think when you're looking for an employer of choice, they're someone who genuinely believes in what they're doing. I know corporate social responsibility is something that is becoming a trend almost. You look at everybody's website, they're all about giving back to the community, they're all about sustainability, they're all about flexible working arrangements now. And we'll have to be careful about, not greenwashing, but corporate social responsibility, that type of way. And an employer of choice, they genuinely care about you as a person. They want to develop you. And I think also you should look at the ecosystem that they're interacting with. What kind of clients are they working with? Are these clients only profit driven? Because that just gets filtered down the line. If a client is profit driven, then your team is forced to focus on the profits, forced to focus on program, how you're going to make money, and then people end up working longer hours because they want to try and be more productive on site. So an employer of choice is someone who genuinely believes in what they're doing, and they genuinely invest in their people.
Fantastic, thank you. And David, you were kind enough to come and talk to the students 2 weeks ago at UTS. A lot of the students are still here, actually. But you often tell the students to work for an ISO-rated builder. And I know that doesn't define an employer of choice, but I was just wondering if you could just give the students some advice as to what they should be looking for in their future employers.
Well, Martin, I'd like to make my answer about all of you, because I think if I was talking to my younger self and I look back and thought, well, what were the attributes of an employer that would be attractive to me? At the top of my list would be, are they respectful? Are they bringing you into their place and showing you a level of respect that says, I want you to be part of our team and they walk the talk. So, for example, those of you who follow me on LinkedIn will see some of the most atrocious site conditions I put up regularly on my site, and expect that to get even more intense. I am still seeing a large number of employers out there who are not showing respect for their employees or for their trades. So I'll be looking for someone that immediately made me feel this was a respectful place to work. And I can see a number of those. Your company's one where it's a respectful place to work, and I'm really pleased to